Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sports Card Academy, where we talk with sports card market experts to learn more about their collecting, their investing, and the thought process behind it. Today, we introduce a man who really needs no introduction. He's one of the hobby's budding stars and media personalities with an online presence that can pretty much best anyone except Gary Vee or Ivan from Watch the Breaks. If you've posted a basketball picture on Instagram, there's a pretty good chance that our guest today has liked it. Welcome, Chris, from the House of Jordans podcast and one of the creators of Card Ladder. Thanks for coming aboard tonight, Chris.
Thank you, man. I am a prolific Instagram heart pusher, and I love what you're doing with Sports Card Academy, and I appreciate having me on, man.
Awesome. So I think the best spot to kick it off is just to talk a little bit about your collecting, how you got into it, what's your PC, and sort of how you approach the hobby.
Absolutely. So I collected as a kid, and then I stopped, and then I came back in 2016 unintentionally. I was back in the same home that I'm actually in now, actually visiting with my parents. And my mom encouraged me to take a look at the cards that were in my childhood room closet. I did.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were a lot of fun. This was actually during the NBA Finals. And so while the finals were going on, I was pouring over all these cards, and it just connected with me in a really visceral level. I just absolutely loved it. One thing led to another. I started looking up, the value of some of these cards. I wanted to see what they were worth. And obviously that leads you to eBay, and then you start discovering grading and how pricing works, and you go down the whole rabbit hole. Before you knew it, I was going to local shops. I was piecemealing out my collection, trying to sell all the stuff I had as a kid, trying to build up a little bankroll from it so that I could, there was one card that I really wanted to buy, which was the Michael Jordan Scoring Kings insert. So I sold enough cards until I could buy that. I bought that. I remember the thrill of the heart pound winning the auction, and then the ecstasy of waiting for the card to arrive in the mail, and then it finally gets there, and it never leaves my side for a week. So I absolutely fell in love with collecting when I came back. And so that snowballed into building a Michael Jordan collection very conservatively. I spent the first 6 months or so focusing on extremely low end cards, like PSA 9 base cards that were selling for $5 to $10. I would do stuff like that. And then once in a while I would, make a big purchase and buy the Scoring Kings insert was $120 range, something like that. And I vividly remember buying the Competitive Advantage BGS 9 insert for $115. But other than that, it was very low end. And, before you knew it, I had 100 cards or so, and I was getting all these mail days and stuff, and it was a blast. And then I started making Instagram content. I actually started making that right when I first got back into the hobby. And I really took an interest in market trends and stuff, and seeing why card prices would go up, will go down, or stay stagnant. So even back then in 2016, I was posting these eBay screenshots and discussing price trends. And at that time, dude, in the hobby, people did not like that. I remember people were not fans that I was talking about market. I was talking about prices. But I still did it, and it was fun. And, before you knew it, man, I had this collection. I had a little network of friends on Instagram from just making content, liking other people's content, them following along with mine. Group chats emerge. And, before you know it, I'm learning the game. And people are kind of showing me, hey, this is cool. You're buying and selling these Jordan cards and stuff. But, this is look at this Jordan card. And this is awesome. And, so I started learning more and more. And, I've kind of, one of the things that's so fun, man, is when you have that Grail card that you just think you'll never own.
Yeah.
But you work up towards it. So that became my process, was trying to consolidate, trying to build up into a Grail card. I grabbed a few of those. Then in 2018-19, something crazy happened. Luka Doncic came into the NBA, and he was immediately driving this flock to Prism basketball. It was everywhere I looked, social media, message boards, everywhere I looked, Prism basketball. And so, Christina and I decided, hey, let's go chase some 2018-19 Prism. Let's chase this new rookie. You know, let's have some fun. And at that time, boxes of 2018-19 Prism were $200 to $250. So we were picking up those boxes, hobby boxes. We were ripping those. We were trying to get to a Luka Prism Silver. It took us dozens and dozens and dozens of megas and of more hobby boxes, retail boxes. We finally hit a few, and then we were like, okay, this is fun. You know, we got these Luka Silvers and stuff, and this is cool. And like, we're really getting into, you know, collecting this kid and collecting this product. And so we started following Luka's career very closely. And, you know, before you know it, I'm on League Pass. I'm watching every single game. If he's sitting out a game because of like an ankle injury or something like that, I'm like throwing fits. I'm addicted to watching his rookie season develop. And I had like a turning point in when I said I want to collect Luka on a big boy level was when it was around the time, it may have even been this game, when the Mavericks beat the Warriors, who I believe they were without Curry, but it was still Durant and Thompson and Draymond. They beat them by like 45-ish points. And Luka had a stellar game. Dirk was still on the team. He had a stellar game. It was around that time that I said to myself, I want to really collect this kid, right? Like I'm more than just a fan. I want to become a collector of him. And so shortly after the season ended for the Mavericks, because obviously they didn't make the playoffs, National Treasures basketball came out. And then, you know, we were at a shop and we made a big plunge at the time. We decided to buy his NTRPA. Then, you know, so that was like a big milestone step into, you know, getting into Luka collecting, and then it just it spiraled out of control from there. And now, partially due to market fluctuations and partially due to just the shift in collector interest and dividing my collecting interest between Jordan and Luka, you know, our PC is pretty much half Jordan and half Luka at this point. So that's my hobby story in a nutshell, man.
Well, if we could backtrack a little bit, there was something you said about coming back into the hobby, and it just like that switch flipped and you're back in it 100%. I think a lot of people have that story. I actually got back into the hobby. I think it was 2016 or 2017. I accidentally one-clicked buy a box of Clearly Authentic, which is like a single card baseball box at like 2:00 in the morning after I had worked really, really late one night. It arrived a couple days later. I popped it open and it was a Buster Posey rookie acetate reprint. I ended up selling it on eBay for $275, $300, $40-$50 box. I was like, damn, there's money to be made here. And since then, I've sort of navigated my way through what's available in the baseball market to really find what I enjoy collecting. But when you were introducing your background and your collecting, you had used the word bankroll, and that just like that triggered for me, because if you're a gambler or if you're a DFS player, you always want to think in terms of your bankroll and your units. You don't want to get overexposed to one player, one game, one entry. You want to spread those units around. Do you look at your PC that way? Are you like, all right, I got 100 units here, 50's going to Jordan, 50's going to Luka. I really want another NTRPA, but that means that I would have to sell 30 units worth of other Luka cards to get there.
I've never explicitly thought of it in those exact terms, but there's definitely an underlying philosophy to the PC that tries to keep it balanced. Like it should never, honestly, 50-50 MJ and Luka is skewing too hard in favor of Luka. Because Luka is a much riskier proposition than Jordan. And also I think I just like Jordan's best cards. I like better than Luka's best cards. So those two factors factor in. But Luka became such a huge part of the PC, not because I went out and bought Luka's with the intention of that happening. That happened because his market exploded when his sophomore season began, and he, you know, went well beyond what I expected and what a lot of people expected him to accomplish. And then, you know, he just had a big game last night. And in this market, one big game in primetime TV over a tough opponent is apparently enough to set your market on fire.
Yeah.
So,
Shout out Bull, TJ Warren, and the like.
indeed.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a lot about sort of markets and sort of building up your knowledge, but I'd be remiss if we didn't touch on your expansive footprint in the hobby community. I got written down here: Card Ladder, House of Jordans, Conversations with Chris, the Crossover, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple others. You've been on countless podcasts and countless YouTube videos. How did you go from Instagram collector Chris to what you're doing now in all these different areas of the hobby?
Yeah, well, I am a voracious consumer of hobby content, especially if it's like in the vein of basketball cards. So that means that I bother a lot of people about their podcasts and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to share stuff, and so when it did come time that, hey, I actually have something relatively interesting going on, uh, people were amenable to collaborating, which was amazing, and I'm really appreciative of that. Uh, so what happened was one day my cousin Brian, Christina, and I were all sitting around a table. We had cards out, and I have a background in music, and I know a bit about audio engineering, and I have a bunch of microphones and in a studio. And I said, let's do a podcast and let's talk about Michael Jordan cards. There had been like a little demand for it, among the Jordan card collecting community, that
Mm-hmm.
let's put some of this knowledge into the audio format. And I love to talk about the market and about cards. And so, we just decided to record a podcast, and we did. So like that was the start of content creation. And this was in December of 2018. So this was one of the we were predated in the basketball card content world by like Josh, obviously, of Cardboard Chronicles, who was like, the forebear, the predecessor of a lot of content that would come afterwards in the basketball space. And Jake of 90s B-ball cards also had a channel going as well. And then Kyle of Wax Museum started around the same time we did. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would be remiss if I didn't mention Adam, the Real 27 guy, who had a basketball card podcast that like actually he took a hiatus from in 2016. So that was like the old school basketball podcast. So when we came into the content space, there wasn't a ton of content out, and that is over time. It took months and months and a lot of bad episodes. I know that our first episodes are bad because when I look at the analytics of what people listen to, they will go back and listen to the first episode, and then they will not listen to the second or the third or the fourth. So they go back and then they stop and they don't go forward at all. They're like, okay, this wasn't very good at the beginning, but we got better. And as you make content, you kind of just naturally fall in with other content
Yep.
creators.
You hit your
And
stride.
hit your stride, and then making content becomes easier, and it bleeds into making social media content, and you start getting in touch with more and more people, start building more and more different communities and networks and stuff like that. And before you know it, you've got all different types of content creation and stuff going on. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's pretty much how that process works. And I think like our space is still young enough that and I see lots of new content sprouting up all the time, that people, there's still time, if you want to get into making content and kind of try and build something up, and especially if you got something insightful to offer, go for it. I think people should go for it. I don't know how you feel about that. What's your take on sort of the content scene right now? I mean, you make terrific content. It's extremely analytical. It's right up my lane. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I am actually my profession. I'm an auditor. I audit big public companies, and my specialty is analytics. So I'm naturally a right-brained person that approaches everything. But I guess the way that I look at the content community is there's a lot of people out there that are trying to hustle to 1,000 subscribers and that 4,000 hour watch count, so they can monetize their channels. But there's an equal number amount of people that are just out there looking to share their cards, and they don't necessarily have a quote unquote like real life friends that care about their collecting, so they come online for it. And that's part of what I enjoy doing. It just comes through in an analytical lens view, because that's the way that I approach pretty much all aspects of my life. But it's funny that you had mentioned those early episodes of House of Jordans, because pre-COVID, I do a lot of travel, just driving from client to client, and oftentimes you'll have a 2 hour, 2.5 hour commute there and back, and I would just put House of Jordans on 1.5x speed, and between the drive there and the drive back, I'd pretty much get through an episode and then have one ready to go the next day. So, I mean, you guys were covering a lot of analytic driven conversations. Let's talk about a cards market, but also support it with what the facts and figures show, rather than like what elicits from an emotional perspective, which has a place in the hobby, but it's not my preferred sort of choice of content. But it's a great segue into how we can build our knowledge base up. So you're a Luka collector, you're a Jordan collector, but how would you go about trying to get to know a product's market? Say there's a third year Luka product coming out and you want to pick a very low numbered parallel up. How would you approach that? Or the next Luka comes along and you're trying to pick out who that player is going to be in order to inform yourself of which cards to buy, how to buy them, when to buy them, etc.
Yeah,
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Take the second part first. How do you pick a player maybe that you want to prospect on? And like I'm very risk averse, especially relative to the typical person who's looking at prospects and sports cards. So it literally took watching Luka for pretty much a full year before we even decided like we want to get him involved beyond just like ripping prism packs and pulling some of his cards. So that would be all I can speak to is what I did, and I was just very cautious and with a full with fully informed that he might not pan out, or there might be a sophomore slump, or they're fully aware that these things could happen, and still knowing right now that they still could. But even with that knowledge in mind, like I just enjoy collecting and supporting his career and watching his career so much that it outweighs whatever risk is on the other side of that equation. So like with a player, I would just say like, dude, just inform yourself as much as you can, and it becomes fun. To me, learning and researching a player is extremely fun. So, I have a rotation now of, I don't know, half a dozen Mavericks only podcasts that I listen to. And I listen to every single post game show as I'm like working. And I just, I can't get enough of it. So it can become really fun. But yeah, I say like learn as much about a player as you can, study podcasts, content that focuses on your player and that focuses on the league too. I think like both of those things are very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of learning like cards, I'll speak to what I did for Luka in his sophomore year, because what happened very quickly was his rookie cards became too expensive for me. So I wanted to find something else. I wanted to find a different lane that I could occupy to collect Luka cards. And that lane became second year one of ones. There's I did a quick study not long ago of how many Luka one of ones that are not material, not jersey, not patch, not autographed, just true cardboard one of ones that Luka had in his rookie year, and it was like I think the number was around 180, excluding printing plates as well. So like that's a lot of one of ones, right? Like that's a lot. And so I said, and I think one of ones are really really cool. So I like the exclusivity of them. So I said, let me try and chase some second year Luka one of ones, and let me look at what the market is like for these cards. And so I got my eBay save search queued up, and I couldn't believe that you could get second year Luka one of ones for a fraction of, or at least lower than, what like his Prism Silver PSA 10 was going for. Because to me, I was like, that's a very highly transacted card. It's a card you can go get whenever you want. It might cost you, but the card is available. And in due deference to that card, it's obviously seen as the placeholder of his progress as an athlete. It's like, it's a very important card, and I get it. But I said, if I can get one of ones from his second year, I can be the only person out there having that card. I just love the idea of it. I love one of ones. I think they're so cool, and that like allows me to collect cards from like lower end sets even and stuff that like might not be super appealing, like oh, here's a Luka base card from Absolute, or 2019-20 certified, here's like a Luka base card. Like, nobody's too concerned about that card, but the one of one is really cool. Like, that's a way to, and that's a really nice looking set. So like, I can go pick up this one of one, have the coolest card, the coolest Luka card in this whole product, and I can do it for cheaper than a Prism Silver PSA 10. In that case, like much cheaper. That made a whole lot of sense to me. And so I started doing that, man. Anytime a second year Luka 101 would pop up on eBay, buy. And, not even really negotiating. Like, I would try to make an offer. I would try to come in and make an offer, meet the seller somewhere. But like, if the seller was putting up resistance, I was just buying. And then, I even moved into some 2018-19 one of ones. I picked up 3 of the one of ones from 2018-19 threads. So like, started adding some rookie one of ones. That was really cool. I got the 2019 Prism Far Out Luka one of one. Like, all these one of ones. Like, it was a lot of fun. But then there was one that came up that I wasn't sure about personally. It was the Net Marvels one of one. And I showed it to Christina. We were actually in Illinois when this happened, visiting for the holidays. And I showed her eBay and said, look, $550, Luka Net Marvels 101. Should we do this? Do you like this card? And she was like, that card is awesome. She's a comic book nerd. She collected comic books as a kid. She's like, that card's freaking awesome. Do it. So we bought that one. And that one has turned out, like all the ones I picked, all the ones I picked, they're probably, nobody cares. They might even be worth less now. But, well, probably not. That's probably but that one went absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
Because the Net Marvels insert set became hugely popular. So what it wasn't like we said, oh, this card is going to be huge, but it's having a philosophy of here's like a way that I'm going to approach eBay that like pretty clearly nobody else was doing, because I was able to get all these one-on-ones as they were hitting eBay. And then staying true to that philosophy, we hit on a card that became really big. So that's how I do, man. I try to find a lane that works for me, that I come up with myself, that wasn't told to me by anybody, but that resonates with me. And that's why it's good to like always kind of cultivate your taste and like your hobby intuition. Always stay sharp with that, and always be refining your taste and learning and studying and appreciating cards and opening product and just doing the whole thing, because it cultivates and refines your taste. And that's the same way I approached Michael Jordan cards too. Was I was slightly ahead of the movement to pick up the Grails, so like I was like the last person to pay a reasonable price for a PMG Red, I think. But at the time, the price that I paid was so ludicrous that people, it traveled through hobby circles and people mocked me for doing it. But that's that I didn't care, man. I just wanted the card. And then and now Jordan Grail collecting has become a pretty big thing, so but there's also been things that I was just totally wrong about. Like, I thought Noir Spotlight Signatures from Luka's rookie year, I thought those cards were gorgeous. I thought like, dude, I'm gonna get a bunch of these because like I think that these are super underrated, and here, this is my opinion. And they never exploded at this nearly the same rate that the other stuff did. They did go up in value, but the thing is that compared to the rest of his market, they were losers. So, I could sit here and say, I did a great job picking these, but no, those cards were terrible picks. So, you win some, you lose some by, going that strategy, but I can speak to my experience. That's kind of the way I've always approached it.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, we got a little bit of feedback here, but at the end of the day, you have cards in your collection that you can be proud of and you can look back on and you can say, this is a card that I really stuck my neck out there for. And regardless of whether the value 10x's like we're growing to expect overnight, or it stays steady or even declines a little bit, it's still a card that represents a player that you've bought into, and you have that experience of all the time and effort you put into researching that pick. And I think that needs to be considered too in the grand scheme of things. But starting off sort of that portion of the conversation, you had mentioned all these Mavericks post-game podcasts that you listen to, the Mavericks podcasts themselves. What do you think, as being a true fan, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say super fan of Luka, what type of competitive advantage does that give you in the marketplace versus someone that's like, Luka's the hot thing right now, I don't really give two shits about Luka or basketball in general, but like, this is a great flip for me? How do you see that sort of the things outside of just cards helping you collect and buy and sell Luka?
Yeah, terrific question. The first thing I would say is, if you're not careful, it can become a competitive disadvantage because you can get sucked up into the hype of the local team fandom that naturally is at the heart of coverage of podcasts and stuff to focus on a specific team. But on the other hand, if you balance it with like some national coverage and you look for the overlap, what you'll find is that the local podcasts are always ahead of the game. They're always, they were high on Luka long before the national media got on board with him. So they were, and they continue to be ahead of that game too. Like one of the Mavericks announcers on the local home streams. Oh my God, I can't believe his name. Derek Harper. He was way ahead of the curve Luka's sophomore year in describing Luka as a top 10 NBA player. So by the end of November, Luka averaged a 30-point triple-double and led the Mavericks to like a 14-6 record, and they were like third in the West or something. He was Western Conference Player of the Month. It was one of the best months of basketball that anybody's played in a long time. And Harper, at the very beginning of November, was like, guys, I've been watching this kid. I see him in practice. This guy's one of the 10 best players in the league. Watch out. And Harper is always the first one. He'll always go out and say something and he's also, recently when Kristaps Porzingis, he has been having a terrific run here lately. Mm-hmm. And Harper was ahead of that one too. So like, Harper's a guy who I listen to, and to see like what direction his hype train is leading in, because it's anticipated a lot. And so Harper was ahead of the curve on that. And then by the end of November, going into December, lots of the more national media type of outlets were talking about Luka as an MVP candidate this year. So like they're a little bit ahead of the curve. They see things happening before the national media does. They react much more quickly, but they also can be very susceptible to hyping up their team and their player.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Getting too excited about it. But you also then end up immersing yourself in, I like more analytical driven content. So there's one, the Mavs Moneyball podcast is one of my favorites because they get extremely analytical. And, I learn more and more about basketball as I listen to them analyze stuff. And it gives me tools and insights that I can transfer when I'm looking at other players and when I'm watching other games and when I'm thinking about other basketball players, whether I'm collecting them or not. It enhances my ability to enjoy the sport. So you'll get a mix of different types of content when you listen to the local content of a team that you're supporting or whatever. And above all, it's fun.
Yeah, you got to be careful with local guys. I'm here outside of Boston, and there's a couple of radio stations that refer to Celtics fans as green teamers, and it's like the Celtics can do no wrong. And some former Celtics players are now media personalities, mainly Tommy Heinsohn and Cedric Maxwell. And every once in a while, you'll hear Tommy going off about how Jalen looks exactly like Larry Bird, and like, this is the best small forward I've ever seen. He's got to step up on Paul Pierce, and Cedric Maxwell saying the same thing. So if you're coming in outside of Boston and you're listening to these local podcasts, take what Tommy says with a grain of salt. But you had also mentioned just eBay search history and sort of loading up your eBay saved searches. And now I know you are one of the co-founders of Card Ladder, which is making the whole research process a little bit easier. But are there any other tools besides eBay that you use to sort of familiarize yourself with what's out there in the market, what the market is for a particular card, or if you're just trying to do some general research on a player or a sport? Where do you start?
Yeah, so 130point.com is a great site. It can give you best offer accepted information. You can search by the card name or the ID number. And they also, like, Panini makes available its product checklists. And then they take them and they aggregate them and they put them into like a really nice clean format. Like when I was doing my research on how many Luka 1-on-1s existed, I was just going through the 2018-19 basketball product checklists. So great website there to dig into, like, on that level. Watching breaks is really cool because you get to, like, see a bunch of disappointing boxes honestly get open, and you don't have to suffer through being the one who opens it yourself, and you get a sampling of the product and you get to see what it's like. So you get to kind of vicariously live and go through the experience of opening product and not have to experience the disappointment which comes with most boxes of not hitting anything good. So breaks is fun, and it's a good way to learn about products. The best way to learn about products, though, is to open the product yourself, but that's a very expensive learning curve. But if you do open the product yourself, you get a very strong incentive right away to figure out what cards from this product that you just opened are worth something. And before you know it, you're searching eBay and you're trying to figure out what the stuff you just pulled is worth, and then you're looking at, what if I grade it, how will that change the value of it? So that will lead you down a lot of productive rabbit holes. I think browsing social media is a good way to learn about cards and products and sets, and or at least could be a jumping off point. Some people write some like really thoughtful write-ups about cards that they own because they love cards, and they'll go into great depth and share a lot of knowledge about cards. So like, that's a great resource. I'm trying to think of like other tools, and YouTube, man. And I said like breaks, but like YouTube in general and podcasts in general. There's some great podcasts out there that and YouTube content out there that teaches about products and sets and collecting, and and buried in it is a lot of wisdom as well. So like, that's a great starting place too to get information. Panini has a blog that whenever a new product is coming out, they publish a bunch of information about the product. You can look at like photo showcases of the product and stuff like that. These are some of the places that I look. I like to look at message boards too, but maybe not as my first resort. Yeah. But message boards can have some good information too, but it can become toxic, all the comments and everything.
Yeah.
So those are some of my starting points, at least when I start researching a product. And but eBay is always the go-to because there's just so much information, pictures, related items, like so many ways you can go down rabbit holes searching for cards on eBay, that I think eBay still wins that.
I hope all our viewers were taking notes, because you just rattled off sort of like the top 10 websites to bookmark on your computer. You made a great point though about actually ripping the product open yourself, even if it's just a blaster or two, or maybe a mega, having those cards in hand and being able to pick up and figure out what the card stock feels like, whether there's surface issues, corner issues, centering. I mean, I'm not a basketball collector, but I picked up a couple cellos of Prism back in November, December, whenever they first came out. And I couldn't believe how awful the centering was. Just like modern day basketball cards that were printed and cut 70-30. Tops is not perfect, but there's not 70-30 cards coming out every other pack. But it really puts things into perspective when you go onto eBay and you're looking for a raw version of the card, things to look out for. If I was just going in blind to pick up an RJ Barrett Prism rookie, I wouldn't necessarily know to look for those little dots on the side of the Prism cards unless I had them in hand, or I watched breaks where someone coached me through that. So I think a low entry point is just to pick up a blaster or a mega and rip those cards open yourself.
Well said.
So next question. Do you believe someone can be successful in building up their collection or flipping to make a couple bucks on the side if they don't actually watch the sport?
Yes, but not with it will be much harder with an active player because it's such an informational advantage if you're paying attention to a player's market. And like, honestly, one of the inefficiencies in the sports card market is that a lot of times what happens in a game on a Wednesday night doesn't fully get internalized by buyers until they've seen the ESPN coverage the next morning, and then they've seen it make its rounds through media and through hobby media, and then we sometimes we don't see prices really reach their apex when it's in response to a short-term stimulus until maybe a day or 2 or 3 days later. So like, it helps a lot to watch sports in that regard, because then if an active player just does something significant, then to do a number of things. You can try and get ahead of the game and start buying up that player's cards. I'm sure people do pretty well doing that. Like Michael Porter Jr. is a good example. Now he's strung together several good games here, but like also, his Prism Silver PSA 10 like took several days before it got up to the $2,000 price point that it's at right now. Like, it took a while. So if somebody came in and was buying at 500, 600, 800, 1,000, they've done extremely well. And that is information that could be easily available to you if you've just been closely following his career and his progression. So like watching sports, like that helps on that level. And it also helps you when to sell. So I had some Trae Young cards, and I saw last year there was a quadruple overtime game against the Bulls in which he went off for, I think it was 49 points. And I said, I bet this is going to set the Trae market on fire, because it was just waiting for it. Just needed a reason. Yeah. And it did. And so I threw up a couple of my Trae cards on eBay, sold them at like 3 times what they were selling for a few days prior. Of course, now they're probably much, much more than I sold them for. But, at the time I felt very shrewd. So that helps. But the other thing, but like if you're collecting like Michael Jordan, for example, you can build a terrific Michael Jordan collection without having to pay much attention to ongoing sports at all. Yeah. Because that market is almost completely devoid, unrelated to what's happening in the day-to-days of sports, but not entirely. So like there are ebbs and flows. There can tend to be like cyclical effects in that market. So like during the NBA playoffs, sometimes Jordan cards can be available for cheaper. And then during the NBA offseason, sometimes they can be a little bit more. And then during the start of the NBA season, they can be a little bit cheaper again.
With the thought process that people are putting money into the Zions, the Lukas, the Jaws. Gotcha.
Yep, exactly. And and that's kind of naturally where hobby attention gravitates. Is like,
Mm-hmm.
here's the new thing. Let's enjoy this throughout the season. And the playoffs happen, and teams drop like flies as the
Yep.
rounds progress. And you remember again how difficult it is to win even a playoff series, let alone a championship, let alone be the best player on a championship team, let alone
Mm-hmm.
do it uninterrupted for a decade. And then by the time the season is concluded, people are like, oh man, that Michael Jordan guy was pretty good. Let me go look at some of his cards again.
Yeah.
So like, that's my explanation anyway. I'm not sure if that is actually how it works, but that's how I think it works. So, like, the answer is yes and no, right? Like, it depends
Yeah.
on who you're collecting, but you can definitely build a terrific collection of like a retired player
Mm.
without having to pay much attention to sports. But it always helps to pay attention. Like it can only help you to be aware of what's going on and what hype cycles might be happening in the hobby at a given moment.
Mm. Now I think a lot about football when that question pops up, because I mean, you might be exposed a little bit in basketball if like you have a team that has Andre Drummond going up against the Celtics, because the Celtics don't have any big men, and Drummond's going to pop off for 25 rebounds. Um, but you don't really get that in baseball. You don't. I mean, there's righty lefty splits, but it's not as emphasized in some other sports. Football, it's really all right. Does this defense play zone? Do they play 3-4? Is my wide receiver, my tight end, going to tear it up this week? Because if they are, I might load up on some cards for a quick flip on like ComC or Star Stock. But am I going to know that 3-4 is a thing, or like nickel defense is a thing, if I'm just buying Chris Godwin cards and selling them on eBay? No, probably not. I also only know that through Madden, so I'm sort of talking out my ass here. But example of what someone that actually knows and understands the sport and the strategy behind it, how it can translate into your hobby and your collecting. I want to switch gears a little bit though, because you had mentioned the Luka RPA, and you're collecting it. Started off, you were buying $5 to $10 PSA 9 Jordan base cards. That's sort of opposite sides of the spectrum here. So if you were talking to someone that's dealing only in cards under $20, but they're looking to get the grail of their player, there's a big mental block for most collectors in paying over $100 for a card, and then over $1,000 in a card. Now, when you go over $1,000, you're in an entirely different ball game. But what would your advice to be to someone that's looking to make that jump into like the next level?
Hmm. Like what would the advice be in terms of like how should you think about it?
Yeah,
Or
like I got $1,000 in my hand right here. My wife just asked if we want to go on vacation for the weekend, but God damn it, I made this money buying and selling sports cards, and I want to put it into sports cards. How
yeah.
do you wrap your head around? Because the money in the hobby right now, to me at least, has felt like funny money. I sold 2020 Mike Trout Ermsey card for $1,700. And now it's just like I'm playing with house money. I'm looking
Yeah.
at Tatum Prison rookie cards for in a PSA 10, which are selling pretty strong right now, between $750 and $900. But if
Yeah.
you take that amount out of the hobby and say, what can you buy with $900? You can buy a new set of irons. You can do a whole bunch of stuff with $1,000. So it's, I mean, for me and a lot of other collectors out there, when you're getting into that next level of collecting, you're looking for the silvers, you're looking to pick up RPAs. You're in a different ball game, and I'm wondering if you had any concerns along the way where you gut checked yourself and you're like, damn, I'm dropping a lot of money on this card right now. How do you get comfortable making that commitment?
Yeah. Oh man, that's a really, really interesting question. You know, I, it was always, and it always has been for me. Collecting has always been an extremely emotional, or I don't want to say impulsive, but visceral. It's just been visceral, and so it just has always, for me, it's always been like, I need that card more than I need the money. I just
Yeah.
need the card. I want that card very badly, and and it's such a unrivaled experience when you do put yourself out there and pick up a big card that you really are excited about and you really know a lot about and you really wanted for a long time. The reward is that. That's a big part of it. Is just the experience of it, and the way that it lets you relate to the community. And not everybody is quite as extroverted with their collection, though. There's a lot of people who just collect very quietly and they just enjoy it in their own, in the with an audience of one, just themselves. And that's a totally different way to do it, and that's amazing too. One of my favorite parts of collecting is just when I take the occasion to just go through the collection and just look at every card and think about the story behind it and the point in my life in which it was acquired, and like what it signified to me as a collector when that happened, and what the card is worth now, and like think about all that stuff. It's all part of it. It's all part of the reason why we chase those grails. If that is if that's the way you think about it, then I think you don't have a choice. Ultimately, you're gonna do it. It's gonna happen.
We're addicts.
Yes, it's gonna happen. I don't know, man. There's you make such a good point that like $900 goes really far in day-to-day life. Or well, I think about like how much rent and stuff is these days, but it still goes really far, right? But like, it doesn't go that far in cards right now. Not if you're trying to get into the key cards or the key players. Giannis Prism Silvers are 30 to 40 grand, and it's just like, geez, like, okay, this is nuts. So I don't think it ever will be totally rational. I know there's a lot of people out there who not a lot, but there's some people out there who try to figure out how it might be rational. Like there's people, especially people who buy wax and hold sealed wax. I know like that contingent of collectors are doing it not because they love to look at a box, but because they see it as a way to really hedge or to bet in favor of a particular draft class, a particular product, and the hobby as a whole. So that those guys are doing things, and then you start really talking about dealers a little bit more. So like those guys are doing something that does have like a more rational flavor to it. But like when it comes to collectors, especially like player collectors and those big cards, we like do buy cards and hope that they go up in value. That's for sure. But we ultimately buy them because like there's something like really that drives us to need to have that card.
And I think there's a couple other things that we can think about too when we're thinking about those big cards. If we're going out and spending that money on a vacation, we're spending that on an experience, and after the week or 2 weeks is over, all you have left is the experience. If we're going out and putting that money on a down payment on a car or a new set of golf clubs, those are depreciating assets. We're not spending that type of money on an income producing asset. And we're not going to get into like the whole, is sports card a true investment? No, because they can't produce income for you, but the market on these cards can go up and down. So I think that's one thing that I at least tell myself to sleep at night. There's a pretty good chance that this card will retain its value. And if it doesn't retain it fully, it might go down a little bit. But you also have that entertainment aspect. Anytime you pick up that card, you think about the chase. And that's how I'm wrapping my head around it and rationalizing with my wife when she's looking at all the money I'm spending on baseball cards as we're moving into a new house. But it's it's a delicate balance, just trying to just walk the fine line between being fiscally responsible, working on off a budget, but also navigating, especially if you're a basketball card collector these days, the hundreds and hundreds of dollars that it just takes to even buy a simple hobby box. But we're running a little long, so I got 3 quick questions to wrap things up. If you could change one thing in the card hobby landscape right now, what would it be?
I would, if I could wave a magic wand,
Yes.
I would make people, well, I don't know. I'm going to say what I want, and then I'm going to say why it's a dumb idea. I would make people become way less competitive. You see it on social media all the time. When one guy has a breakout game, it's like clockwork. What follows? Player X has a breakout game. Collectors and investors in Player X rush to social media, post their pile of Prism Silvers or what, or Prism base cards or whatever they have, post their RPAs, post their big cards. They say, "Look at all these awesome cards! Isn't this amazing? Man, my collection's going up in value. How smart am I?" They don't really say that last part, but they're like, "How great is this?"
They don't have to say it.
No, right, exactly, right. And so like, and then like everybody likes it, and it is fun. I do get a real kick out of seeing people enjoying and having fortune go their way. Like, it's fun and it's inspiring, and it makes you feel like, man, that could be me next time. So that's fun. But then what happens? Inevitably, what happens? The step 2 to this is chain reaction. Is that everybody who doesn't collect that player, and especially people who don't like that player in particular for whatever reason, then they all start going nuts. They're like, "This guy's overhyped. Look at this. This is trash. What about this guy? What about this guy? What about my guy? This is so ridiculous. I hate this." And so then that happens. And then, it happens with another player, and then it happens to your player. And then if you've been through this cycle enough, because I've been on both sides of that. I've been the guy who's like, this is so stupid, like, that this player's values are going up. What about Jordan? Jordan should be going up, not this guy. I've been on that side of the equation, and I've been on the side of the equation of like, oh crap, like Luka's values are definitely going up in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. A whole flood of posts come in, and then people are like, yeah, and then people are like, this is dumb. Like, Luka price, and I kind of agree. Like, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of dumb. This doesn't make a lot of sense, but. So, like, I would love to just, like, do away with that whole cycle. Could we just, like, not get overly braggadocious when something great happens to us? Could we please not do that? And then when something great happens to somebody else, could we please be a little more understanding and supportive and, like, cheer them on? Like, could we just be a little more civil when something like that happens? But here's why that's a dumb idea. It actually, first of all, it will never change because it's something intrinsic to social media that we just like to show ourselves at our best and never show ourselves at our worst. We'll show the steak dinner, but we won't show the McDonald's we had for lunch. And so that's never going to change. But then also, it might actually be good for the hobby when people react and, like, show off, and then other people are like, wait a minute, like, this doesn't make a lot of sense, because then you get both sides of a story, and it's always good to hear the other side when it comes to, like, oh, this player's values are going up. Because if all you're doing is just looking at eBay or just looking at data, and you're like, oh man, these prices are going up, like, you can get sucked into the hype of that. But if you go on social media and you hear people who are, like, providing commentary, and they're saying, like, actually, this is really dumb and this guy's values are going up, they might be right, they might be wrong, but, like, it balances it out, and it chills the hype. The anti-hype and the hype all work out. So I'm asking for a kumbaya here. Can we all just get along a little bit? But, like, at the end of the day, A, that's not going to happen, and B, maybe it wouldn't even be a good thing if it did. But that's a pet peeve of mine, man. It's just, we're so competitive in this hobby, and it just gets on my nerves sometimes, like, how freaking competitive we can be.
Well, the checks and balances are needed, one, and then I think our middle ground, too, is more meme accounts. Looking at you, Lameme James, instead of just outright bashing people, let's do it passive aggressively through memes.
Yeah, passive aggressive memes,
Yes.
and then he produces enough memes for 10 accounts. So
All right. So we only need like 5 more Lameme James, and then we'll be perfectly balanced, as everything should be. Question number 2: if money was not an option, what would be the one card you would add to your collection tomorrow?
So like any card, pick of the litter.
Yep.
Jordan PMG Green and Luca Prism Nebula 1 of 1.
Awesome. Now, our final question of the night. What is one non-hobby related item that you would like to share with all of our viewers tonight?
Ooh, non-hobby related item.
Yeah, it can be a fun fact about you, something cool coming out in Card Ladder, tease some upcoming releases. Totally up to you how you want to answer the question.
Did you say non-hobby related or hobby related?
Oh, sorry, non-hobby related.
Okay, so
Card Ladder is off the table.
But I do appreciate the opportunity to give to give Card Ladder a plug. But non-hobby related. How about this? School is awesome. I went back to school at a non-traditional age. I started college when I was 24, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved it so much that I got an associate's, I got a bachelor's, and I got a law degree. And dude, the stuff that I've learned in school and like collecting while being in school is really fun. It provides a great balance to like the to the diligence required in studying and like doing well in school. Like, and then you have the hobby, which is fun, but also benefits from having a scholastic mindset. So like I love the balance that I had when I was a student and a collector at the same time. And when you study like theoretical topics, whether it's economics, whether it's social sciences, whatever, it can be really fun to transpose what you've learned onto the phenomena that you're seeing in the hobby. Mm-hmm. And it's doubly fun because there's been very little academic work done on the hobby. So like in some ways you might be discovering or applying analytical frameworks from academic disciplines to the hobby. You might be the first one doing it or one of the very first few people doing it. So that's my thing, man, is school is great. And I need to get into some classes now that I graduated. I already feel my brain deteriorating just not being in classes. So that's my random hobby thought for the day is don't underappreciate school. School is cool, man.
That's awesome. And I think you made a really, really strong point about sort of non-traditional students. I went to an undergrad that is mostly non-traditional students. It's a lot of inner city youth. It's a public institution. And the people that were in my classrooms weren't the people that went to high school, graduated, and then mom and dad paid for them to go to school. They were working full time. You had folks that were retired that wanted to continue improving themselves. I had a history class with a 70-year-old man that was working on his 6th bachelor degree because he enjoyed learning. So I think that's just a phenomenal point. Keep learning, keep developing yourself, whether that's inside the hobby or out. Never be complacent with what you have right in front of you. But we can't wrap the show up without talking about Card Ladder. So open forum for you to give the viewers, the folks out there, a plug on what you guys got going on out there.
Yeah, I'd love to, man. Well, first of all, whatever I say will pale in comparison to the video that you put together because the way that you navigate the site, it's like it's exactly how it's beyond what I could have hoped somebody would use the site for. And I'm well aware that there are people, yourself and others, who are better users of the site than me. Like that definitely has happened, and that's okay. I don't even get to use the site that much because I'm so focused on data architecture. But
Mm-hmm.
card ladder, like basically what it is, my tagline for it is telling the story of the hobby with data. And there's lots of different stories depending upon the type of hobbyist you are. Maybe your story involves tracking the value of your collection. And like we want to give you the tools to do that. Maybe your story is you just want to know what's happening in the hobby and what cards are hot, and have that information like presented to you in a clean and organized and reasonably objective format. And we try to do that too. But the thing that actually has emerged as the most, in my experience, as the most pragmatic application of what Card Ladder does is we just have graphs. And we have graphs that show all-time sales histories, and people take screenshots of them and they show them to people who are not involved in the hobby and are curious about it. And people understand graphs, and they understand what it means when a line goes up and then down and then up again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that is actually pretty cool, is that like we've found a way to put the data of the hobby into a format that makes it understandable to people who otherwise wouldn't get the hobby. And I'll give you an example. So I was at a party with law school friends right after the Michael Jordan PMG Green sold in I think it was February of 2019. And I was at a party and I tried to explain to people why I was so excited about this. And I pulled up the eBay auction and I said, look at this. Look how much money this sold for. And then I would flip my phone over to PWCC's auction database and I would scroll down to 2007 when the card had sold for $5,000. Then I flip back over to eBay, like 350. Like, look at this. Like, this is crazy, guys, right? Like, are you seeing this happen? And they're just like, oh, eBay, cool. You know, they don't get it. Like, and some people would be like, oh, that's interesting. So this card appreciated that much. Is that typical? Is this an anomaly? Like, why is this card like what? Like, this is, I don't get it. But now I've found that when I'm showing people information on cards by using Card Ladder, like my uncle, right? He was like, oh, I see what you're working on here. This is cool. What about this Bo Jackson rookie card I once had? I was like, oh, here, take a look at this. Pull up the Bo Jackson PSA 10 rookie card profile. First thing you do is you see a picture of the card, which one of the reasons why tracking cards is so interesting. And then because just cards look cool. And then you see the graph. And like that card has a very interesting and dynamic graph. And then he's like, oh, okay, this is cool. What else do you got? And then we go to another card. And okay, oh, this is pretty interesting. And then you scroll down and we provide a link if you want to go learn more about the set that it came from. And we provide a link if you want to, an eBay affiliate link that you can click, and it will take you to a curated search of eBay for cards that for that particular card that's displayed in that particular profile. And so, you know, maybe and we show you the pop report for that card, so you know how many are floating around out there. And if you really want to dig in, you can look at transaction volume and see how many times this card is sold and what the selling type was and all types of stuff like that. So like that's emerged as one of the most interesting applications of Card Ladder, is that people are using it to explain to others who might not get the hobby what the hobby is and how it works.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Last week when the logarithmic scale came out, I needed to put on my 10th grade algebra trigonometry hat, try and refamiliarize myself with what's going on. But for anyone that's still looking to sort of master and discover it, all the logarithmic scale really does is show the relative growth of a particular product. So if a card goes from 1,000 to 1,100, that's a 10% growth. But if a card was at $5 and it goes to $35, that's a much higher relative growth than the $1,000 to $1,100. So it sort of flattens out the graph a little bit, so you can dig in a little bit deeper to where the real spikes are relative to the value of that card at the current time. So hopefully someone, maybe me someday, will make a video walking through how to look at that. But excellent feature added in. I don't think any of the other tools out there are doing something similar, but the recent surge in prices has just made the past period data so difficult to look at without that functionality. So as a subscriber, as a user, thank you. Can't wait to see what the next feature released on Card Ladder will be.
Thank you for that, man. And like when you do start looking at logarithmic scale graphs, the like what looks to be almost clownish increases in price when you're using a linear scale becomes a little bit more reasonable when you look at it logarithmically, because the rate of growth, we're seeing a lot of cards go from being a few $100 to a few thousand. And in absolute dollar terms, that looks like just a vertical line. But in terms of rate of growth, when you look over the course of a card's trajectory, a card going from 500 to 1,000 is the same rate of growth as it going from 30 to 60. And so logarithmic graph kind of helps contextualize and provide a different way to think about the growth that the hobby is experiencing right now, and maybe say it's not quite as clownish as it looks if you think about it as a percentage change rather than an absolute dollar change.
Awesome. So before we get out of here, let our viewers know where they can find you, which platforms they can follow you and subscribe on.
Yeah, so Instagram at Chris_HoJ for House of Jordans, Chris_HoJ, cardladder.com, and Twitter House of Jordans, and YouTube House of Jordans, and Apple Podcasts House of Jordans.
No TikTok yet?
We do have a TikTok. We have a Card Ladder TikTok as well. We have a Card Ladder TikTok. So Card Ladder on social media platforms as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been a pleasure tonight. Chris, thank you so much for joining. Viewers out there, let us know what you think in the comments below. Give us a big thumbs up and subscribe. If you're enjoying Sports Card Academy, go check out Chris, House of Jordan's Card Ladder on all their social media platforms. And I think that's going to do it. Till next time, I'm Cardi-C, the baseball card collector. We'll catch you guys later.